So first, thank you all for being here with us today. New York, a couple intro comments, and then we'll move straight into the questions. New York's future hinges on whether we can align capital, public, private, and philanthropic, all of which we have represented here in different ways, to achieve long-term mobility. Catalytic philanthropy, fast, flexible, and risk-tolerant, has powered innovation across neighborhoods for years. But these breakthroughs often stall without structural capital, multi-year government investment, private capital tools, sustainable revenue models, and funding systems that reinforce, not compete with, policy alignment and shared accountability. Solutions to these challenges are what we're going to discuss today. Before we dive in, I'd like to start with a personal note. What's one moment or experience that shaped how you think about investing in people, community, or opportunities? Robert, I'll start with you.
Great. Thank you for having me. It's a really exciting opportunity. I think one of those things that creates a personal connection, I have to reflect on my 11 years in the state legislature as an assembly member representing East Harlem, and just recognizing the disparities that exist in terms of infrastructure and community infrastructure in particular. Some of the things that we fought for and championed were really development of the Second Avenue subway. Why? Because we deserve transit equity as well. Better parks and open space, your East River Esplanade, and realizing that community is built around institutional and generational investments in transit, in parks, in open space, in housing, and recognizing that if we weren't able to bring that, we were not positioning ourselves to be able to be the best community that we can be. And those have stayed with me in my journey later on as Secretary of State, and thinking about how we scale up communities across the state. And then, of course, now at DASNY, where we have a number of different programs led by the governor. Again, focusing on communities. How do we build and provide that public capital to help either address structural issues around childcare, playgrounds, community centers, downtown revitalizations, to begin the momentum that we hope will be followed by private capital and philanthropic capital to invest in those communities around us.
That's great, thank you. Erica, how about you?
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to see you all. These lights are really bright. I run something called the David Prize, which is, I often explain it as a mix between MacArthur Genius Grants and angel investing, but only for people in the 5 boroughs. So we invest in individuals, and our mission is around investing in New Yorkers' potential, specifically New Yorker as our unit of analysis. And one moment that I remember that has really shaped how we think about our work at the David Prize and investing in people is learning from a winner that we wrote an income check to a number of years ago. And she had talked a lot about the challenge of getting capital to do her work when it wasn't focused on scale. It was never going to touch all 8 million New Yorkers. It would never impact all 8 million New Yorkers. And this question of being able to go a mile deep versus an inch wide, or a mile wide versus an inch deep. And I've thought a lot about that as we think about who we invest in at the David Prize, and this focus on growth, not scale, is really important as we think about investing in people and the mental bandwidth to try really hard stuff that I think the city so desperately needs. So not a particular example, but one moment.
No, it's a great answer. Jacob.
Oh, thank you. So I represent JP Morgan Chase and work on their impact finance and advisory team, where we pair philanthropic capital and impact investing for strategies that drive economic inclusivity. But honestly, I don't want to answer that question from the perspective of a banker, but actually from just a little kid in a forgotten place. I grew up in a small town in rural South Dakota, and while my hometown had pretty much the exact opposite challenges that New York City has, one unfortunate similarity was that far too many people struggled to find and stay in a good job. Both of my parents were trapped in bad jobs for long portions of their career, and it always made me ask, why do some people get to prosper and others don't? And I think in trying to answer that question, I've realized that there's all of these systemic factors and resourcing questions that are critical for us to engage in. But the thing I want to say is that I really realized that A lot of that is a fear factor, that people are afraid to change from a bad known to an unknown. And why I have so much respect for the people in this room and the work that you all do is that you're not just giving people training and resources and support, you're giving them the confidence to believe in themselves and take a massive leap of faith. And that is really what has inspired me to do this work.
Yes, I'm always reminded whenever anyone that mentions confidence. Lauren Anderson once told me from CUNY that CUNY students, that's the thing that they say they lack the most is confidence. And that's what stops them from going and applying for a job or an internship or taking that first step. So I think that's, if we can focus on how we get everyone to feel confident in what they have to offer, and I always say, even if you're pretending, it's okay, but just to be able to do that, that goes such a long way. I'll also note in the green room, we realized that both Erica and Jacob have deep South Dakota roots, so they're actually planning some activities there already. Marcy, what moment brought you to your work?
Well, first, thank you for having me. I came up from Baltimore, where I'm based, and I kind of feel like I'm at the workforce prom. I'm loving every minute of this, so thank you for having me, and Greg, appreciate you very much. I really feel in my work, I've worked in the nonprofit sector, federal government, and then philanthropy for 18 years, and now I am the principal and owner of a consulting group that works with nonprofits and philanthropy. And I would say the one piece that I think is incredibly important that you all touched on it is really kind of the human-centered design work to make sure that you're being responsive and respecting of the communities that are being served and where you're investing your dollars. There aren't enough resources to do everything. And so being really focused and being able to prioritize what is absolutely needed. I would say personally, my uncle was born with developmental disabilities. He's since passed, but for certain organizations, he would not have had a meaningful life where he was able to work for 40 plus years at an organization. And just seeing the impact of work on him was something that really motivated me to get into this field.
That's great. All right, Marcy, we're going to stick with you, but others should feel free to jump in as we go through these questions. How can philanthropic actors better coordinate with public agencies and private investors so funding streams reinforce shared outcomes rather than compete or duplicate efforts? And it's great that you're sitting between private and public, so go for it.
So I have seen since 2007, when the National Fund for Workforce Solutions was founded, originally there were 3 funder collaboratives involved with the organization. Now there's more than 34, including here in New York, which Judith Smith, who is here, I don't know where you are at the moment, but she's in the back. Everybody should know her. She's wonderful. She runs the New York City Workforce Funders Group, which is based at the New York Community Trust. It really brings funders together to break down silos, to align resources, and to really focus on innovation where philanthropy can be supportive. As I said, you meet one funder, and if everybody's working on their own priorities and silos, we're not going to get anything done as a community. So in my work now, really trying to help philanthropy come together, but also it's a little different in each of these funder collaboratives. I've worked a lot in the Baltimore one, where the Mayor's Office of Employment Development is at the table, as well as the Baltimore County government. So if you can bring government to the table with these funder collaboratives, it's an amazing opportunity to not only think about outcomes that have been achieved, but really think about where things need to go in the future. I would say there's really kind of a tipping point right now for New York City in thinking about priorities. And so for all of you, you should not be working in silos. And it doesn't just land just for philanthropy and government. I think focusing on the human-centered design piece, engage with the nonprofit organizations, engage with the clients of the nonprofit organizations. Right now is the time to really listen and to rethink, because the resources are not going to be available to do everything you want to do. And if you want to be as meaningful as possible, this is the time you need to really kind of re-strategize and think about ways to do more with less.
Okay. I mean, I agree. And there was a comment in an earlier discussion today about creating a system of warm handoffs, so that if a person walks into one nonprofit for a service provider and it's not the right fit for them, that there's a place to send that person so that they're not lost in the system and don't feel, and I think that when resources are even tighter and more constrained than they are now, how we can better coordinate amongst ourselves, even if the system is not doing it, I think is really important. So that speaks to that. All right, so public financing is in trouble. We've heard that. DASNY sits at the intersection of government, financing, and community institutions. How can state-level financing authorities reshape the way we fund long-term workforce education and infrastructure? And I'll also say that I would love you to talk a little bit about what DASNY does.
Yes.
It's going under a rebrand. There's going to be a new name. So maybe you can just start by describing that and then move into the question.
So just to speak a little bit about DASNY, now the technical term is the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York, but we are so far beyond dormitories. That started 80 years ago as part of our history. We were responsible for financing and building housing for the State University of New York for folks coming back from the GI Bill. That was 80 years ago. Since then, we have evolved as into the premier public finance authority for the State of New York. We finance probably 2/3 of all of their capital borrowing, and then we are also the conduit issuer of taxes and financing for private educational institutions as well as our private healthcare institutions. So the names you all know, the Montefiore's, the NYU's, as just examples for both of those. We are also a builder, as I mentioned, back in our roots, so we also construct the capital projects for CUNY, SUNY, and some other state entities. So we are in the construction business, we're in the finance business, and then little be it known, except for maybe many in the room, our third line of business is grants. We administer the executive grants and the legislative grants. And it just speaks a little bit to that intersection of policy and actually implementing that in different communities. So just an example, I mentioned a little earlier, the governor's Unplugged and Play initiative, which is really about empowering and strengthening underserved communities. We recognize that resource dollars are low. However, we have to step up to be able to meet the current challenges, either around childcare, either around helping folks to disconnect, and certainly post-COVID reconnect with their communities. So we've invested in $100 million in municipal playgrounds, $100 million in municipal swimming pools, another $100 million in bricks for community centers and senior centers, really pushing people to, one, get the services and create a place that we all need. And frankly, those are the areas that are underfunded traditionally and historically, don't get the top line of neither private or public capital dollars, but we recognize the human and the social impact that we have as a result of investing in this infrastructure. So our role is to certainly make that a priority, and then going to the long-term sustainability component is how do we figure out how to continue to maintain this investment over time? And certainly that doesn't come by itself, right? It comes with partnership. It comes with our nonprofit and our philanthropic partners. In any of our grant programs, we require additional dollars there to be able to get, the biggest and the best impact, even if we're serving underserved. So all of our partners here, have to participate and believe in that direction and that vision and the impact there for our programs to be successful. And really, we're there to take the first step or be the last step to get projects over the finish line.
That's great, thank you. Turn to private financing now. Jake, I know JP Morgan has been innovative in providing flexible funds to workforce providers, including through non-grant investments, such as debt and equity. Can you just talk a little bit about that strategy, what led you to get to that point, and what that actually looks like in some of the projects that you've worked on?
Of course, and I think for a little bit of context on how we got to this point, because our impact investing strategy is only 5 years old, but our presence in New York City is over 250 years old. And the way in which we are committed to this work is driven by some really obvious factors. The first is that we're one of the largest private employers in New York City. We have 25,000 employees serving 4 million consumers and more than 500,000 small businesses. And we deeply understand that in order to do that work, we need to have the ability to attract and retain the best talent and have a training infrastructure and pipeline that supports us over the long period of time. And that has really motivated us to lean into supporting a stable and strong workforce development ecosystem. We have tried to work with organizations to change the ways in which we are hiring and signaling the skills that we need, doing things like removing college degree requirements for thousands of roles and developing apprenticeships with organizations like CareerWise that provide alternative pathways into high-paying, high-growth opportunities at the firm, but also are trying to leverage different types of capital to address these types of work. We have provided $130 million over the past 5 years philanthropically, $25 million focused exclusively on workforce development, and have tried to also lean into what is one of our core competencies, which is structuring investments and loans that work for our clients and ensure that they have the capital that they need to do the critical work that they do. And we have pursued this strategy in 2 key ways, one driven through lending and debt, and one driven through equity investing in venture-style companies. On the debt side, we have found a lot of opportunity in structuring low-cost, stable loans to financial intermediaries like community development financial institutions that then on-lend to training organizations and community colleges and nonprofit organizations. A great example of this work is the Reinvestment Fund's HBCU Brilliance Fund, which was established to help capitalize some of the lowest sort of capitalized HBCUs. And what they are able to offer is a stable, responsibly priced and structured debt facility that allows them to make investments in their facilities, like building a new dormitory or a new classroom, but also some really mundane but actually really important things like cleaning up their capital stack and refinancing existing debt in a way that decreases their monthly financing costs, improves organizational sustainability. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in the way in which providing the right credit at the right moment can provide a lot of impact. And then the second piece that we are really excited about is supporting really innovative workforce development startups that are building the types of technology, products, and services that we think are really driving a new frontier of opportunity. Example of one of our portfolio companies is FutureFit AI, which many of you may know. They're based in New York City and have a user-centered product that wraps around the job seeker the information about various training pathways, the labor market information about what opportunities are adjacent to their current skills, and really helps path them into the next available opportunity. And I think trying to support with really flexible equity financing these types of solutions is a way to ensure that there is a robust set of technologies that you and your clients can all use to train people more efficiently, assess their skills more accurately, and ultimately improve their ability to stay and prosper in the job market.
So the first half of what you said included a lot of words that I'll admit I don't understand, and that's okay. That's okay. But I'm wondering, as you're thinking through this strategy and you're approaching organizations, or organizations coming to you and saying we're looking for different financing models, or are you going out to organizations and saying, actually, I think you're a target for a different financing model. Let me explain what that means and help you see that from your perspective, nonprofit who may never have thought about this?
Yeah, it's both. I think a big piece of it is that nonprofit organizations or educational institutions will say, I need a $10 million loan to build a new dormitory. And our team says, we aren't necessarily structured in the way to give that to you, but we absolutely understand why you need that capital. And that's why we find these financial intermediaries. So a big class of them is community development financial institutions that are designed to be able to lend outside of the traditional credit box of financial institutions. So we are really trying to find the organizations and capitalize those organizations to ensure that there is a full capital continuum, and that these organizations then can access the capital from those types of organizations, and then sort of hopefully also access traditional financing from financial institutions, but deeply aware that that's not always available.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And CDFIs are being brought up more and more as the city starts to tackle the housing crisis in the city and looking at CDFIs as a potential tool. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes as well, separate from workforce, but closely tied, as we know. Erica, you talked a little bit about the David Prize. I didn't feel that we wanted to add any more, but In general, the David Prize elevates individuals with transformative visions. What do you think is needed to help those ideas transition to long-term, scalable models supported by public or private capital? And we were talking before, and we were talking about this growth mindset, and I said to you, but not every organization wants to grow. Some want to stay exactly where they are, and I was curious what your experience has been from the grantees over the years. Is that true, or are there some that really do want to scale? And then for those that do want to scale or grow, what are the challenges that they're facing?
Yeah, totally. I think there's a lot of organizations that just want to do what they do and not be bothered with having to do it for everyone all the time in every borough, on every block, and report back to hundreds of, if you know one funder, you know one funder. Yeah, we meet a ton of them, and I think the city has really excellent partners to support that infrastructure. Citizens Committee, I don't know if Julie or Michael are here, do excellent work in that and help bolster these organizations that are doing block by block work. Some do want to grow. Sometimes growth is surprising or looks surprising. Sometimes it's not providing a service to everyone. Sometimes it's telling the story about the service or the case or the tool that was used and working through narrative change, doing the case study and influencing people to think about the case differently or the service differently. I think a lot about when we fund an idea and what it means for an idea to grow. We have the privilege, and just to give some context on the David Prize, so let me walk back. Our mission is investing in New Yorkers' potential. We do it in 3 ways. The first is we run a big open call every year that's open to any New Yorker. We advertise on the subways. I compete with Casper Mattress for attention, which is really expensive.
Your ads are much better than the Casper.
It's really hard to do. And anyone can share their idea for the city's future. 5 people win every year. We hear from thousands of New Yorkers, and yes, only 5 win. And we write income checks. It's a $200,000 check over 2 years, unrestricted. I can't ask how the money's spent. I don't care. It's legally structured as an award for past achievements. And it is intended to free up mental and financial and emotional bandwidth for really smart people who care deeply about this place to do hard stuff. And what's really important about this first pillar of our work is it requires a long-term horizon. We're not expecting the work to have ripples tomorrow. We're not expecting the work to have ripples in a year or 2 years. It might be 10. We're funding a person to test a hypothesis or explore a question, to try something. And we're willing to fund the failure or the risk, the learning, I would call it. And we fund folks to take that space to pivot or try something else or pull a different lever. And I think that spaciousness requires a long-term vision and the space as a funder to stay long-term, to stay true to that, not just say it, but genuinely have your reporting system speak that. And so that would be one thing I think is really important, is if we're gonna fund ideas to get to a level of scale, every funder across that chain needs to be honest about what their expectations of time horizon for impact are, and maybe like switch a little bit, maybe be a little bit softer or take a longer time horizon. I have the privilege of being able to do that because of where the funding comes from. It comes from a real estate developer who has spent a long time committed to a single vision. And so that same ethos is in the philanthropy that the family I work for does, and that is true to the David Prize. So long-term time horizon feels really important. The warm handoffs you mentioned, I think that's true with workforce programs, but it's also true for funders. We're terrible at it. In fact, I've been shocked how bad philanthropy is at being clear about when we fund and what we fund. In venture capital, there's a lot of language, although it's shifted quite a bit, but there's language to talk about what round, at what stage do you fund? When are you a good funder? In philanthropy, we're not good at being honest about our value propositions, and I think that makes that warm handoff murky or difficult to do. And the other piece to that is funding that space to have relationships with funders across that time horizon. If you don't trust, if I don't know anyone at JP Morgan, like I wouldn't even know how to make it, to to make that warm handoff and to make sure the folks that we're investing in are set up for success for that conversation with you, something as small as that. So I think a lot about warm handoffs too, and the relationship or funding that space to build trust between all kinds of different people. I fund a lot of dinner parties, and I think that's where a lot of this comes from, but I think having that warm handoff is really important. And then the last piece is funding coalitions. I think the surprise for us has been funding, the space to imagine different solutions that might not be just about your organization. Sometimes it's about working with lots of different stakeholders that might not feel on the same side, but together can bid on a much bigger contract or can collectively get into automation when it didn't feel possible before. So I think coalitions or funding space to build that trust and relationship is really important too.
Interesting. Marcy, I'm curious what your thoughts are in hearing all of this so far.
So it's interesting. In thinking about financial institutions, during COVID, CDFI, a lot of foundations funded CDFIs to provide low to no interest loans because of the delays in procurement, which may or may not still be happening. We'll leave it there. But
different panel.
Different panel. But I do think that, philanthropy really needs to think about, and I agree with Eric a lot, think about, what's best for the community, where are the needs and how, and I mentioned breaking down the silos, but also listening to the employers where, if there are welding needs in the Navy Yard for whatever reason, is there actually a welding trainer in the Navy Yard? Thinking about opportunities that need to be created and exist and not just looking inside. I know New York is very special. But there's the whole world out there of really evidence-based programs that do really great work. And I can just give a quick example. Actually, in Baltimore, it was about a decade ago, we were looking at small and medium employers who really needed CNC machinists and welders. And there was not a training pathway for that within Baltimore that was reasonable or available to more low-income individuals who could end up on a career path. There's a great organization, Jane Addams Resource Corporation in Chicago. We went there, we looked at the organization. It included somebody from Maryland Department of Labor, from the city of Baltimore, funders, and also other service providers. We all took a trip to Chicago to look at this organization and see if the model could translate to Baltimore. And I'm happy to say, now I think 8 years later, it's been implemented. It's been fulfilling a need within Baltimore for the medium and small employers. And it's been very successful. And they're now providing advancement training, which is really important for former graduates, and also providing opportunities for other CNC machinists to gain additional certifications and using that as a way to increase their income. So there are creative ways to work, and I think social enterprise might even be a piece of that to think about for organizations, but only if you have the capacity to. Don't take on a new project because you think that will be the solution. Starting a social enterprise can really, really be challenging. So if there's a collaborative, if there's an opportunity to work with organizations that are doing it well, I would say learn from them before jumping into that type of work.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, we often spend a lot of time as workforce development. Don't work for a workforce development organization, but I'm talking to them often. And we spend a lot of time focused on what the large employers need and not enough time thinking about what the small and medium-sized employers need. And that is, as all of you know, where the majority of New Yorkers work. And so thinking even like going down to the very program level, like you mentioned welding, that has come up multiple times in very different conversations. Yeah. Are there welding training programs in New York City? I think there are some, but not enough to meet the need. Yeah. So it's like, and their need is by the smaller and medium-sized employers.
Right.
So, yeah. So Robert, you've heard all of this. From DASNY's vantage point, what do you think philanthropy and private partners should do or do differently to ensure that ideas are structurally financeable by the state?
Yeah, no, with regards to structural financing, the most important thing is having a sustainable recurring revenue source, right? That's critical. So for for us, oftentimes, it's thinking about how do we create some of that sustainable revenue, but we can't be all of it, and making sure that we bring the partnerships to be successful. Just a couple of examples. We'll build the infrastructure for either community colleges, for places like BOCES, which is our cooperative education programs across the state. We'll create facilities to be able to make them work. We have enrollment in terms of numbers, but what are the programmatic elements or the workforce development partners that are going to take that on to make those aligned with the private market need? And I think that's where all of our workforce development dollars try to support those initiatives. So we on the state side make sure that we invest in these facilities that clearly have a need. But one of the other things, I'm just going to wear my economic development hat because that's my construction and finance hat, is that government will enter into arrangements and opportunities that require the market to respond, philanthropy and the private sector. A perfect example is like our Micron trend, the long-term Micron deal, $100 billion, transformative to Central New York, and we've got 10 years to get this up and running. We have a recurring revenue source, and how do we build the place, the systems, the workforce development infrastructure to be able to meet what we know as the long-term demands and existing revenues around that. So we're, as I guess, first mover, since we inked the deal, we start this $200 million on-ramp program to really think about how do we, across the whole, Central New York spectrum, start to really engage community for workforce that we're going to need over the next highly trained and sophisticated workforce that we're going to need. So we've kind of put the money down. We know we have ongoing revenues, and this is an opportunity, to have our partners respond and really think about what's the best way to do this and tackle this problem. And really there's, those are some of the problems that we
on Micron, can we look at downstate as a talent pool?
Absolutely.
And think about creating, we've talked about this with some folks I see in the room, we've talked about this, in developing a real partnership with, we have the talent here, and not to suggest they don't have it in Central New York, but what I've heard is they don't have enough.
Yes.
So how can we better connect interregionally?
And I think that's going back to this silo conversation, and it happens in multiple areas, right? So if there's a workforce need, high-skilled labor, not just there in semiconductors, you could swap that out for construction. You could swap that out for construction-related businesses, and trying to get New York City people to think about the opportunity in Central New York or Western New York. I'm not even pushing the North Country here, it's significant. So really our last, 4 years have been about investing in the communities across different parts of the state, creating downtowns and livable communities that will deal with the potential workforce shifts and trying to encourage, the business opportunities that exist there. So, plugging the holes in different ways, but, at some point we need the market to embrace some of these strategies and help support them.
Well, you have folks here who are interested in working on that, so we can. Jacob, you talked about the debt and equity models that JP Morgan has used. What other financing tools or approaches have the greatest potential to move us from one-off grants to more durable, scalable investment, particularly in the workforce and community infrastructure piece, in your mind?
Yeah.
I think the ideas from other places too.
Absolutely. I mean, I think at its core, it goes back to Robert's point, but maybe from a slightly different perspective around sustainable and reoccurring revenue. Anyone who's going to think about investing in or lending to your organization will want to understand how your cash flows operate. And I think one area that has been really unsettled ground as of late is around sort of federal financing. And I think previously there's been opportunities to look at reoccurring WIOA financing or Pell financing and being able to sort of understand and extrapolate that into the future. I think there's an opportunity for organizations to start thinking creatively about different payer models, to think about ways in which you can get employers to prepay for talent development. I know that has always been a holy grail for the workforce development space, but I do think it's an area of opportunity where there's really acute workforce shortages in healthcare in specific regions, in advanced manufacturing in specific regions, where people are really willing to come around the table differently and have resources to give, but not necessarily understand the best way to structure that. So I think the way in which you can sort of show that that reoccurring revenue and that the demand signal is there is then a way to then ensure that you have access to the financing to sort of deliver on that promise.
Okay, thank you. Marcy, I'm curious on your thoughts on what barriers really undermine long-term investment from both the public and the private side and the family foundation side, which you're very familiar with. And then also, how can we develop a cross-sector strategy to really tackle this issue?
In many ways, you need to have the right people at the table. If you're not speaking to each other, if you're not looking at outcomes and evaluating, and I know that there are immediate needs right now, and that might take a back burner, but if you're not sitting at the right tables together, there will be a lack of progress. I actually went up to Syracuse and saw the progress that's happening there, and there's a funder collaborative there, CEO, who's amazing.
That's right.
And they are preparing for this Micron, like the people who are going to be coming and really shifting the way the unions actually work in their community. And I don't think I'll be speaking out of turn, but a lot of the trade unions, it's brothers and uncles. Well, they are flipping that on its head and really becoming more open, more diverse, providing more opportunity for those individuals who live there, who should have open opportunities, and also hoping that more people from other areas will come. But it's really important to have the public, private, and philanthropy at the same table, having the conversations to, kind of broker some deals together and really discuss it. And that's why funder collaboratives like the one that Judith runs here, I think is so important. And they're a little different in every community. And I think having or considering to have the state, local partners at the table, especially in this moment, is incredibly important to move things forward.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm a big fan of Judith's work and all of the events they put on a regular basis. And then we're also thinking about this at the Workforce Development Board and in other areas. We're thinking about what the new work requirements that are coming down the pike for SNAP and Medicaid and what that's going to mean. And we're being very deliberate with making sure that we have all of those players at the table to think about possible solutions that we can implement.
And if I could just add, I sat on the Baltimore Workforce Development Board for many years, and it's a very active, it's a board that I would look at as a model, not just because I was on it, but it really did good work. One thing that they are focused on is really looking at wage outcomes and partnering with the collaborative there to figure out, what are, for the workforce programs, how are we looking at wage records to look at longer term outcomes? Are we supporting the right industries? Are the industries still valid, still meeting employers' needs? Are there changes that need to occur? And that's something that can be very helpful. And if you go on their website, you can see it for the Baltimore Workforce Funder Collaborative. You can see a report where, I'm trying to think quickly, like a biotech program where upon completion of the program, individuals' annual wages were about $12,000, but 1 year or 2 years post-program, they were in the high 40s to low $50,000 a year, which in Baltimore is starting to get into, sustainable wages. So.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this because the wage reporting system is something that we're making strides here in New York. So I'm hoping that in a few years we'll have some really good outcomes to show. But your model of using philanthropy to fund those efforts is one we've taken to heart. So I appreciate that. All right, Erica, I'm going to give you the tough question. Given your particular interest in collaborative efforts, if the next administration wanted to unlock structural capital for mobility, what is the one action that you would urge them to take in their first 100 days?
Structural capital. I feel so, there's so many people. Well, this is, I think, part of the challenge, right? Is like family philanthropy should be funding a lot of the bets that you wish the market would take, but the market isn't incentivized to. And we are, and yet we're not, we do a lot of our homework. I don't have a quota system with the David Prize, but we do a lot of our like macro research to get a sense of what pockets of innovation are needed in the city. But I think there's a lot more connective tissue even in the workforce space where it's like, yeah, what test do you wish people could take? What kind of, anyway. Okay, I think, what did I say? I wrote down a bunch of things. I mean, look, I think listening to the private sector around where the real needs are is really important. And like listening to, in New York City, the labor force is gonna change a lot. And I'm no AI expert or technology expert, but I think we all know in the room that like jobs are gonna look really different. And I think being proximate to those conversations and genuinely listening is gonna be super important. Not rocket science, but probably would be my first priority.
Okay, that's a good one. Okay, we have a big clock here that's flashing the time that I was told to pay attention to, so I am. So as we wrap up, we're going to end with one lightning round question. So Robert, I'm going to start with you. What is one thing that you'll take away from this discussion? Maybe something surprising, something you hadn't thought of before, or any of the other sessions that you may have listened to today?
Yeah, I think the one that's most exciting for me is that creating an ongoing partnership between philanthropy and private sector, and on a regular basis, some sort of dialogue to be able to do that is critical for us on the state side, because we will grab things at different parts. And I would say some of our more innovative projects are the ones that, philanthropy and private sector brought to us, Empire AI or the Climate Exchange or any one of these kind of big thinking projects that we get around that, certainly we are committed to, will invest in, but cannot bring to fruition on our own. And it requires that ongoing collaboration and partnership. And then thinking about how we bring you to those conversations that we may have singularly on the state side, which may seem a lot more like the blocking and tackling, kind of how do I deal with public infrastructure? How do I deal with community infrastructure? How do I, deal with, human, and workforce-related issues and innovate there. Right? How do I bring your sense of commitment and innovation to some of the things that we're doing that may, not be as sexy as the AI or as, important as, like the large-scale private deal, but maybe equal, how do we invest in scale on small to medium-sized businesses, that are struggling on some other technological capital or some other business problems. So how do we keep that conversation and dialogue going to use what is outside of the government walls and going back to silos and really learning from your best practices and what you see out there in terms of your own investments.
Jacob, what's one thing you'll take away from?
Yeah, I think it's two things, which was sort of your comment around warm handoffs and then your riff on that around knowing your lane. So many people come to JP Morgan with really spectacular ideas and on such important causes, and yet we have to say no because of the parameters that we have established for our philanthropy. And I think, it's always worth recommitting yourself to saying, this is no, but I will open a door for you, or this is no, but I will help you think about how to get to a yes. And there's always that extra mile that sometimes feels hard to walk, but it's so important to, finally stitching together these ideas that really change things.
Marcy?
I would say be bold, be creative, align resources, and take risks.
Okay, I like it. Erica, what's one thing you'll take away from the conversation?
That maybe we should look outside of just New York City, which is the best city.
Yeah.
But maybe
I know.
Hey, maybe, just maybe, that's my main takeaway.
I'm here for you.
I don't know if I can admit that, but yeah.
For me, it's this warm handoff idea. I think about it a lot when I think about workforce providers and also employer to employer and educational institution system to employer, but I'd never thought about it from philanthropy to philanthropy. And whether that's from corporate, as you said, it's a no from JP Morgan, but can I open a door here? Or Erica, thinking about if you do have a prize winner who does want to grow, how do you get them into the next level of funding to get them there? So I think that's a great way to end. So thank you very much for your input and conversations. We'll keep it going. Thank you all.
Thank you.